Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1296 New Social Environment. I'm Magley, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Bill Lavender, Courtney Bush, Laura Mullen, and Cole Swensen. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Bill Lavender is a poet, novelist, musician, carpenter, and publisher living in New Orleans. He founded Lavender Ink, a small press devoted mainly to poetry in 1995, and he founded Diálogos, an imprint devoted to cross-cultural literatures, mostly and translation, in 2011, both subjects of today's conversation. Lavender Ink and Diálogos now have more than 200 books in print. Courtney Bush is a poet and filmmaker from the Mississippi Gulf Coast who lives and works as a nanny in New York City. She is the author of the poetry collections Every Book is About the Same Thing, I Love Information, a movie, and The Lamb with the Talking Scroll. A poet and writer of hybrid works, a McDowell and Carolee Foundation Fellow, and a Rona Jaffe Award recipient. Laura Mullen is the author of 9 books. She has taught at Naropa, Brown, Colorado State University, and Louisiana State University, among other institutions. Her translation of Stéphanie Chaillou's first book, Something. Her most recent collection, ETC, was published by Solid Objects in 2023, and she lives in California. And our host today, Cole Swensen, is the author of 20 volumes of poetry, most recently and, a collection of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise. A former Guggenheim fellow, she has been awarded the Iowa Poetry Prize, the San Francisco State Poetry Center Book Award, and the National Poetry Series. She has also translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from French and won the 2024 Alta National Translation Award and the 2025 Stephen Mitchell Translation Award. And with that, I will hand it over to Cole to get us started.
Thank you, Magley, and thank you all for being here. We're really looking forward to this conversation and hearing about these two presses. We always start with a reading by 2 of the 3 people who are participating because we like to hear their poetry. After all, these are all people who are giving up their own writing time to help bring about the poetry and literature of others. So starting with poetry always seems like a good idea. So we will start with Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talk about Lavender Ink. And I'm going to read, which is the side of the press that my book is on. And I'm going to read from it. It's called A Movie. And it's one long poem that's about like making and watching and talking about movies. I'm also a filmmaker. From my mother, I learned a new way of watching movies that I've come to call the kaleidoscopic method. As an adult, the way I most often spend time with my mother when I visit her quiet little house on a block of Biloxi, Mississippi, that has been otherwise abandoned since Hurricane Katrina, is by watching movies together in her bed from morning to night. Sometimes I nestle my head under her arm and rest my head against her breast while we watch. Often she sleeps and I am the only one watching. Because she falls asleep so easily and because she truly does want to watch the movie. When she wakes up, she decides whether she wants to just keep watching from wherever it is or if she wants to rewind the movie so she can piece it together. It often goes like this. Start a movie, watch for a while, fall asleep for a while, watch some more. After a while, go back to the beginning because though you've tried, you can't figure out what's going on with this one character. Did someone die? You start the movie over, but after a while, this time, after having seen a bit more of the movie from the beginning, you fall asleep and sleep for much longer. This time you wake up as the movie is resolving and the characters are on their way to finding peace, perhaps. Still feeling like you haven't really seen the movie because though it is now noon and you started this viewing just after breakfast, and though you've seen a lot of the movie in a strange order, you really haven't quite seen it yet. This time you start in the middle. You see parts of the movie you've never seen before. Inevitably, you fall asleep. You wake up later, you ask your daughter some questions and understand for a while, but something happens. You need clarity. You rewind it a bit, watch a bit. This could go on forever if you wanted, which is one of the many beauties of kaleidoscopic movie watching. This winter, we watched Misery starring Kathy Bates and James Caan in this fashion. While we watched, I tried to keep track of my mother's experience of the film. For her, James Caan's injuries came and went. The car wreck that incited the plot had happened and then had not yet happened. He finished the novel, smoked his cigarette, and had his champagne. Shortly thereafter, he had not yet begun writing. After his ankles were hobbled by the woman who held him hostage, he met the woman, his ankles intact and healthy. The woman was alive. She was dead. She was alive. My mom said, "I thought she died." "She did, but later," I replied. She nodded and kept watching. "She did die, but later." In this way, my mother experiences narrative time in new and interesting ways. And this is about one of the children I take care of for my job, who's 4. One day when I got to work, Milo said, "I make movies too. It's my job. Do you want to come to my movie theater?" Milo had never been to a movie theater because of the pandemic. He held up a little Halloween toy shaped like a phone, which made different Halloween sounds when you press the buttons. He said, "This is my phone. I show each person one at a time my movies here on my phone. Go get in line and I'll take your ticket." I stood in line outside his bedroom door. He walked over, pretending to be flustered. "Oh, hi. Yes, welcome. We're almost ready." He paused for a second. "Now we're ready. You can go sit on the bed." I sat down on his bed and he pushed me down until I was lying on my back. He tucked me in with his blankets. "So this is how it works. I show you my movie on my phone," he explained cheerfully. He held the Halloween toy 2 inches from my eyes. "I think it's too close," I said. "No, this is how it is," he said. Then he began murmuring disjointed words and making strange sounds. I looked at him instinctively. "No, look at the movie. It's the movie." I sat looking at the Halloween toy, my vision blurry from trying to focus on something so close to my face, while Milo made quiet sounds by my ear. When one movie ended, he asked if I wanted to see another. Of course I did. He showed me several movies, and every time I accidentally looked at his face, which was intensely focused on what he was doing, he gently told me, "No, watch the movie." I laid there looking at the Halloween toy, which was feeling more and more like a phone, the imaginary movie seeming more and more real, thinking about this version of showing movies, how Milo had imagined a movie theater and had assumed it was such an intimate experience. Later, during quiet time, I went back to his movie theater at his request. This time the line was much longer. He had to show several other pretend people his movies. I waited at the door while he pretended to show other people several films. He told me when it was finally my turn that he was a little frustrated by how popular his movies had become. "There are so many people now. It used to be just me and you." The bright life is what Dante called life outside of the inferno, the life he left behind. I always think a movie is the bright life, and I always want to make another movie. That's it for me. Thank you. And the next reader will be Laura Mullen.
Woo! Yeah, loved that. Oh my God, I had to mute myself. I was laughing so hard. That's so great. I'm a huge Lavender Ink fan. Many of my dearest friends are published by them, like Susan Schultz, who's here today. Diálogos is an extraordinary publishing venture, and they did this translation, which I will read a bit from, even though it's not my own work. It's kind of my own work, and I'm too excited about it to skip over it. So I'll read a couple of poems of mine and a little bit from Stephanie Chaillou's Something Happens. Starting with my own work, a poem called Late spring 1973. I am down on my knees in the soft red earth, giving a boy a blowjob in the privacy of a lemon orchard. Dark leaves, bright fruit. He had some weed he'd shared. I wanted him to love me. Watergate is a new word. We're coming to the end of our involvement in Vietnam, and we've secretly committed to having our way with the Chilean government. I close my eyes. I've learned to swallow it. We already know we'll need to be passionate about the environment. Subdivisions long ago replaced those groves. We hold each other close when I rise to kiss him, to pour back out this gob of tangy seed I kept in my mouth. And then a poem from ETC, which was published by Solid Objects in 2023. Ooh, nice cat, Courtney. And it's just called The Imaginary Begins. The imaginary begins in the real or the consensually recognized, but flees for reasons we may or may not expect, to be exiled, nomad, cosmopolitan, refugee, not expat exactly, not that timid and judgmental, estranged, yes, but desperately. The imaginary emerges as sacred, homeless, caught at the edge of the country previously called home, and a country which might bear the name of home a while. I see you, the imagination says. I see you seeing me, stepping out into the lack of father land. I see you tenderly, remorselessly. Then from Something Happens, a little bit from the section entitled, in English, The Headless Girl. On a pile of dirt, with his tongue, a boy kisses a girl. The girl grows up. Her mouth receives other tongues, but she doesn't understand. She doesn't ever understand why the tongues of boys wander in her mouth. In the head of this headless girl, pink tongues rest, swinging, nonchalant, suspended from a wire and sprinkled with white dots. They don't do anything. They wait. Hung one by a pin from a wire, they hang limply. Useless. They would have this, the girls, a word which would have grown in them like a desire, a wish, a promise, from themselves, to themselves, for the future, for their body in the future, what they were going to do, what they were going to become, a word that would not be from mother or father, no, not a learned word, something else, a word that would be born from an unknown place, without a progenitor. A word that would have grown in their bodies when they were little, asleep, when they played in the dark, their fingers tangled in the synthetic hair of blonde dolls. They would have had that which would have grown in them and which they could no longer rip out because it would have stuck everywhere, to their eyes, to their hands, to the interior even of their mouth. It would be stuck fast, inscribed, papered everywhere like a skin, a salve which would become a skin. Then nothing, no one could change what would be. Nothing, no one could undo that which inside the girls' bodies would have grown and become them, totally them. In their bodies, something would have grown that they could no longer remove. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. It's a great way to get started today. Hooray. And now let's shift over to Bill and I'm going to start with just a very basic question. You've got two imprints, Lavender Ink and Diálogos, and I am always trying to pronounce that correctly. I know it's the accents on the A, Diálogos. How did you come up with the two? And tell us about the interest in translation that Diálogos specializes in.
I guess I started out in 95, I believe it was, making hand-bound chapbooks, and I needed to put an imprint name on them, and that's when I came up with Lavender Ink. And when I first started, I was just doing book design for fun. That's just what I wanted to do. And most of the people I were publishing were local and friends, and so I called it Lavender Ink without really thinking about it. And as it started to grow, then I actually registered the trade name and stopped doing only hand-bound books and started doing perfect bound books. And then I started running into this interesting work in translation. When I was young in the 60s, it was poetry in translation that actually convinced me that this was something I wanted to do. And those early translations of Garcia Lorca and Rimbaud and people like that were Neruda, um, probably those three especially. And they came out in facing page translation. And what I know of Spanish, I started learning there, and French. Um, and so I had always wanted to do that. It's also a really challenging design um, conundrum to put together a facing page translation volume. And I find those sorts of things fun. And so I started doing that. And Peter Thompson, professor of Romance languages at Roger Williams, and an old friend, and I had conversations about this. And, he and I kind of decided that it would be nice to have an imprint to designate the sort of work in translation that we wanted to do, um, which was not only in translation, but we kind of wanted it to have a political focus, and so the name we came up with was Diálogos, and he taught me how to pronounce it, and now I have to teach the rest of the world. But so that's where it came from. And now both in, I mean, it's one press, it's one website, one catalog, two imprints, and so sometimes it's confusing, but to me as much as anybody else, probably. But yeah, so that's the genesis of it. Yeah.
Is there ever a time when you're not sure which imprint a given text should go into?
Um, yeah, there is. Andy Young's book, All Night is Morning, uh, is a book that's written primarily in English, but has a lot of several Arabic passages in it, and the subject matter is um, it concerns Egypt and the Arab Spring, and it seems to demand the Diálogos imprint, even though it was not a translated volume. Um, so there's one that was kind of confusing. Um, Most of the time, no. Most of the time, it's very obvious. Yeah. So uh, generally, it's if it's in translation, it goes under Diálogos, and it's pretty much that simple. But not always. Yeah.
I imagine it's the ones that aren't simple that are particularly intriguing as well. And maybe
Yeah.
also from a design point of view. Do you do all the design still yourself?
Not all of it. I do a lot of it, but uh, have a new assistant editor, Sean Monroe, who's in the audience. He's been doing some books, designing some books, and he's doing great. And he's a fast learner, and we might have him doing a facing page volume pretty soon. In Russian too. That's always fun when you can't read it. Um, but I'd say 90% of them I did. Sometimes the authors do them themselves, but about 90% of the books I design. Yeah.
Great. Um, I think there's some images that you wanted to show.
Yeah. Yeah, we put together this whole slideshow. So
That's
this
a
is
very good thing.
the first few slides are of the poetry festival. The New Orleans Poetry Festival um, was a joint, or is, it began as a joint venture. Megan Burns and I, 13 years ago, were brainstorming poetry festivals in other parts of the country, and lamenting the fact that there wasn't one in New Orleans. And so one night we very rashly just said, well, let's just start one. And so we did. And so these are some pictures from the Poetry Fest. The one that, well, this is the the slide before this one. Can you go back one? So this is a representative of the mayor's office reading a proclamation anointing the poetry festival as really cool. Um, he showed up by surprise at our locals night reading year before last. And then the next slide is the actual proclamation from the mayor's office. Um, I won't read it to you, but it's got a lot of whereas paragraphs in it. I'll read the first line. Whereas the city of New Orleans proudly recognizes the 10th annual New Orleans Poetry Festival, a vibrant literary event taking place Thursday, April 10th through Sunday, April 13th at the New Orleans Healing Center and surrounding venues. And it kind of goes on and it praises the fest and founders Megan Burns of Trembling Pillow Press and Bill Lavender of Lavender Ink. Diálogos have made valuable contributions to the literary landscape of our city through their vision and dedication to building this extraordinary platform for poetic expression. Signed, Mayor Latoya Cantrell. So that was a pleasant surprise that he came in unannounced. This is the book fair at Poetry Fest. This would have been that same year, yeah, 2 years ago. Prayer Flags by Wang Ping, and in the main hall of New Orleans Healing Center. You can go to the next one. So every year at Poetry Fest, we have a second line with it incorporates a jazz funeral for poets who have died in the year previous. And this particular one, the second line also took on the aspect of a demonstration. And this is Andy Young reading, I'm not sure what, but the demonstration was based on the First Amendment and the dangers it is coming under. So this is from the second line at Poetry Fest. You can go on now. Okay, this is one of our board members, Bernardo Wade, introducing Tongo Ison Martin. That's him in the in silhouette there, waiting to go on stage. I think that was 2 years ago also. Mhm. Or
Just
maybe
last year, Bill.
last year, you're right.
Yeah.
Bad. This is Poetry Fest also, Cornelius Eady and his band performing. We try to get some multimedia things going on. And then the next one, I believe, is Ann Waldman and her band. This was several years ago. I think it was 2019. Yeah. And we've taken to having the closing party for Poetry Fest at Rodrigo's pool. And here's a view from his balcony closing party.
Great.
Okay, and now this is a press sequence, and so these couple of images coming up are a reading that a bilingual reading of poets and translators at the Red Wheelbarrow bookstore in Paris last October, or just about a month ago. And it was just by serendipity, these two books happened to come across my desk at almost the same time, and they were released together. And together they're a very interesting pair of Parisian feminist works, and we were able to put them together. Actually, Laura did a lot of this, and Carrie and Amanda, the translators of the Musempes work. Um, and they did this reading in Paris, and the next couple of shots are from that. There's Laura and Stephanie Chailloux, and the crowd. They must have had a great time. I wish I could have been there.
We
And
missed
then
you. It would have been great to have you there.
and then the gang outside.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. Have that little reading in Paris. And then this is actually it's another Poetry Fest photo. This is a panel on poets watching movies, I believe was the name of it. Put together by Courtney, who's there on the right. And then next, I think I just have a picture of Courtney's cover. Courtney is one of those ones who designed her own book, or at least the cover. And then this is a book launch last night
Woo.
at a bar in New Orleans. This is for Jonathan Penton's book. That's Jonathan directly in front of the mic there. Or yeah. And then I think I have one more. Yeah, that's him reading. This is what our book launches tend to look like, and that's his book cover. Just came out. That's not Jonathan. And
And then
this, Laura dug up. This is the poster from the very first Poetry Fest. Like it says, first annual. So we were already planning on it, going more than 1 year.
I love
Um,
it. And
so
can I jump in, Bill,
sure, go
and
ahead.
say a couple things? I mean, I dug this up and wanted it here in part because, of course, I wanted the reference to Trembling Pillow, Megan Burns's press. I'm not sure if Trembling Pillow is still going, but it's really important. And Black Radish, which was Martha Reed, and Martha Reed was published by Lavender Ink, and I think Martha Reed was the reason you started the second line at the Poetry Festival.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, her
The
death.
year
So
she died, we did our first jazz funeral. Yeah.
yeah, so this is really bringing together so many aspects of the festival and its roots in community that are incredibly important.
Laura was our very first feature at the Poetry Fest, and Courtney will be our feature this year. So they're one of them.
And there's video from that first festival I was reading from ETC before it was anywhere near a book.
Yeah.
And I'll drop that in the chat. But really, I wanted to take a moment to say something that you can't possibly say, Bill, because it would be like you praising you. I'm just going to take a moment to thank both you and Megan for what you did, because it transformed New Orleans. When I got to New Orleans, boy, oh boy, I mean, it wasn't like there was no poetry. There was amazing poetry going on, but it was a pretty restricted scene. It was kind of the gold mine and the maple leaf, and just what you've brought in terms of enriching and diversifying and expanding and inspiring to the community there is extraordinary. It's a literary renaissance. And the two of you founded it and you've kept it going, and Sean's involved. I know Sean could tell us a lot more about the festival, but you can't praise yourself, so let me do it. Aw.
Great. The emphasis on community is so apparent in those images, and I was struck by how colorful they all are. And I imagine it's figuratively colorful as well as literally colorful. And it's just great to have a sense of that spirit being animated, that poetry in New Orleans is something really off the page as well as on it. I was really intrigued to think about how each of you is involved in different multimedia things. Music seems really important. Courtney, with your films. Laura, I know you've collaborated with artists and performers. And I would just love to hear about from each of you about how your work overflows into these other media. And maybe we'll start with you, Courtney.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've always like sort of viewed poetry and the filmmaking sides of things as very separate, but I also wanted to talk about like the community of New Orleans. Like
Yeah.
I live in New York and I've been here for a long time, and but I'm from the South. I'm from Biloxi, which is like an hour outside of New Orleans. And the way I got involved with Lavender Ink was just it was very like social. Like I in a way that surprised made me it made me so happy. Like what happened was I was reading at the Splice poetry series, which Sean, who's here, is a part of, and I read, and I just met Bill afterward, and Bill was like, "Hi, like I really liked your reading. I publish books," and like it was just very like casual, and I was like, "Oh, thanks." And he was like, if you have anything, you could send it to me," and it all just felt very open, and like curious in a way that I haven't found very often otherwise. And then yeah, I went to the New Orleans Poetry Festival. Oh well, I should say like about film. I had this book, a movie that was like this, I didn't really know what it was. It was sort of like a long thing about making movies and thinking about movies. And it also has like within it the narrative of making the most recent short film me and my collaborators have made, which is like this strange 18-minute vampire movie. And um, writing about writing about movies, like I could never really quite find a home for it. And so I sent it to Bill, and he was like, yeah, this is that I like this, let's do it. And it happened very quickly, and it was just like fun. Like everything about it was fun. And it came out even before it came out early, which never happens. So like also that's kind of major. For a small press, for a book to come out early just doesn't ever happen. And but so what I found from writing a poem about making movies, it's like I was able to sort of become a reader of my own poem later as I was making more movies. It was like to having applied language to the process of making movies. The next time I made a movie, I kept remembering the poem, and actually having published the book and reading it this past year while I've also been in the process of making another movie has been a really wild experience, because it sometimes feels like the book is talking to me about making movies. So previously it all felt very separate, but this experience has been actually very wild, and has made me understand sort of both ways of art making differently.
Great. They kind of ricocheting and reciprocal effect
Totally.
sounds. Are the films available anywhere?
Yeah. Yes. So I make films sort of in two different ways. So one of them is with two collaborators who are named Will Carrington and Jake Goicoechea. And we have been making movies together for about 10 years, and we made four short films, and we just finished shooting our first feature in Biloxi in October, which we'll begin editing in January. And those are, I can like write it in the chat.
Yes,
We have
please
like a
do.
website, but it's a Tumblr. I think this should work. Um, and that's where like some of my films are. But then I also have a YouTube channel where because I write about this in the book, but making movies is really overwhelming and difficult and time consuming, and costs a lot of money. And in our last film, which we had like the most production value, and we were able to get a little bit of a budget, it was actually, I found it actually much more stressful than when I was just sort of making movies with just my friends, and we didn't have any resources. So I started this project that I call homemade cinema. Um, which is where I started making movies on my Handycam for no money. So the only rule was that I had to make them during life. I couldn't set aside time for production or resources for production. And those I just put on YouTube because I was trying to remind myself that I make movies as an act of the spirit, actually, and anyone can make a movie at any moment, which you forget when you start making them and realize how difficult it is. Um, so those are on YouTube. I can also like link those if you're interested. But the first homemade cinema movie I made is I used my first book of poems as a script instead of writing a script. So there is overlap too. But yeah, it's been really interesting how they've come together.
It's interesting to hear the idea that as it gets to be more polished, more professional thing, it all gets more difficult. And I can imagine that that's true. And it's an interesting sort of side note on that. Laura, you do a lot of collaborations with performers and musicians and visual artists. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I'm popping into the chat the Vimeo movie of the piece I did with Nathan Davis, where he asked me to write a libretto. I've worked with Jason Eckhart and Claire Chase on various collaborative projects, which have been extraordinarily exciting, and also they've changed the way I think about poetry because of the way musicians practice, because of what practice is for a musician. It's really made me think differently, I think, about art just completely in terms of, the fact that it's always morphing and that it changes you as much as you change it. Those are aspects of collaboration that have been really, really important to me. But I can't talk about collaboration without, forgive me, wanting to deflect it back to the question of community. I guess the other thing I'm thinking about is how much of whatever we see, whatever we encounter, is based on, grounded in, rooted by, supported by so much that we don't see. And you'll probably or possibly forgive me for deflecting a little on this, in part by saying, because I'm not a member of the press exactly, and that Bill has wonderfully asked me to be here as one of his authors, I don't feel right about saying, well, I've given up time to, I haven't given up any time, geez. So gang. So let me send this over to Bill and ask Bill about, because he has a new book coming out, which I'm incredibly excited about, how he's finding time to write while doing two presses.
Well, it's really just one press with two names. But yeah, it's sometimes a challenge. And the last book took 4 years to write, and I really haven't written a word since I finished it, which was almost a year ago now. So it was kind of exhausting, I guess. I don't know, I don't really feel like I'm giving up anything to do all this. I feel like actually I feel like if I didn't have it all to do, I'd kind of go crazy. I guess I have to be doing something constantly. So no, the press has been an incredibly rewarding experience. Emotionally, not financially, but luckily I'm a carpenter too, so that that keeps the budget in order. But yeah, I mean, I really feel the same way. I don't feel like I've given up any time, any important time to work on the press. I feel like the press has like influenced my own work and reinforced it in a way. Um,
Yeah. And how about music? It seems like that's an important thing for you as well.
Yeah, I still play in a punk band, at 74, so, uh, we're still trying to find a gig. They're really hard to find. But, uh, it is important. That's kind of a separate thing for me. Like, I've never really tried to incorporate my poetry and the songs that I write. Songs that I write are very genre driven, and um, I mean, they kind of work off of musical genres. And I guess the poems work off of poetic genres, and that's just the way it works. Yeah. And
Interesting.
and since I'm a punk rocker, not a jazz musician, that's kind of the way it works out. Yeah.
It sounds like music is a very important part of the Poetry Festival as well, the New Orleans Poetry Festival. Um, i-
It is. I
Other
mean,
poets?
we try to have music involved in it every year. It hasn't always worked out, but almost. Actually, one of the reasons, I used to joke with Megan about this, that I wanted to start the poetry festival, was to give my band a place to play. And we used to close it with a Poets with Bands show, of varying degrees of success. But then, we've had, like, Anne Waldman brought her band with her, and wanted to, that she wanted to do that performance. Likewise with Cornelius Eady. Um, and we've had a couple of collaborations. Hank Lazar brought, I'm spacing on the guitar player's name that he collaborates with sometimes, and we've had several collaborative performances like that. Yeah.
Right. Megan, I keep seeing you bursting into laughter. And could you unmute and tell us some of your experiences with the festival? And then maybe we can hear from Sean as well.
Um, Wait, what was the question again? I was laughing so hard. I'm just enjoying Bill. I enjoy when Bill is so honest. When Bill's like, I didn't make any money. Good thing I'm a carpenter like Jesus. um, I think that Bill and I both started the festival for selfish reasons like that. We both, not only did Bill want to do his band, but I think I wanted people to come to New Orleans and see how wonderful New Orleans was, and how I think Bill brought me to AWP. This is really how Poetry Fest started. So I think it was my third book that came out with Lavender Ink called Commitment. He brought me to AWP to launch the book. And then he was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Man, I love the poetry readings and I love the book fair. It'd be awesome if it was in New Orleans, though, so I don't have to fly to somewhere where it snowed that year." And I've only seen it snow twice. That was one. Except I saw it in New Orleans last January. But yeah, I think just having, like Laura Mullen said, being part of some of these reading series. I think I ran reading series for like 17 years in New Orleans. Um, and then I went to Naropa, where I think I met Laura Mullen maybe at Naropa before you came to New Orleans. So there's that connection too, with the Naropa connection. But yeah, I think the biggest draw for Bill and I is that we love our city. And post Katrina New Orleans, we were like, people should come here and read their poems. People should be on this soil and sing their songs and do their healing work here, if anywhere anywhere in the country at this point. Now, I don't know if New Orleans has that. There's a lot of places in the country that need it now, but I think in 2016 we were still feeling like we need people here. We need people to come to New Orleans. We need people to remember and not forget us, and see that we're still struggling. We were in 2016 still struggling to rebuild after Katrina. And I'm very proud. I was very proud that the mayor acknowledged that, we did that work, and hopefully we'll continue on. And I'm very, very proud of Bill Lavender. He is my mentor. He's the person who taught me how to publish, and Trembling Press, and it's 40 books. We're all because of Bill Lavender. So
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. This year's headliners for New Orleans Poetry Fest. One is a musician, Jerome Ellis, who's going to be playing a bunch of music. The other is right here, Courtney Bush. Proposals are still open for the festival. You can still propose a reading, performance, a roundtable discussion, a workshop up until December 1st. And you can also, if you have a small press, you can also buy a small press table. That's primarily how we're funded, is through the small press table purchases. Not too many grants rolling around this year.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that the festival is free, completely free.
Free to open to the public.
Yay. Great.
Yeah. I wanted to say just about the festival also, last year was my first year in attendance. And so I wasn't around like in the beginning. And just as somebody who has come to late to the party, it was like unbelievably varied. Like there are so many things that happened there that I found it like incredibly exciting. There like, I mean, there's music well, I mean, there was music involved in some of the readings. Like there was like a flautist from Paris, but then also there were just like, it was very the festival is feels very experimental. And I saw like PowerPoint poetry, like people doing this sort of performance art, was really interesting. I was able to do that panel that you saw in the slideshows. I called it Poets Watching Movies because in the past couple years, I just noticed there were all of these great books coming out by poets I admired about movies. And so I proposed this panel and was able to get like poets who I really love, like Ed Steck and Marie Buck and John Yao to come. And we talked about like writing about movies and, then there were like more academic panels and then it's really fun. Like I had a great time and learned so much. So I just wanted to add that like the actual experience of the festival is like wild. It's just like running from room to room to try to get, and you're like, I'm going to the like UFO thing. And they're like, oh, I'm going to like the Frank Stanford thing. Like, okay, see you later. And it's like, it's so fun.
That great testimony there. We can picture it. And it's interesting to contrast it with AWP, which is so huge. And I've never been, I've got to come to the New Orleans Festival, but I've always understood it as much more intimate. So that one has a feeling of being a part of a single community instead of the explosion, the wonderful explosion that AWP is, but nonetheless a really different feel, it sounds like. So what's next, Bill? Where do you see the press going?
Well, I struggle with that somewhat. Shall it just keep going and maybe expanding and getting bigger and bigger? I'm not sure. Um, I don't foresee any drastic change. We're just gonna try to keep on doing what we're doing. We went to the Alta conference this year for the first time, American Literary Translators Association. And that was really good. Met a lot of people, met people for the first time that I've been corresponding with for years, and also met new people and uh, translators mainly, and got exposed to some new work. And so I foresee a lot of that in the future. And I also see a lot of Lavender Ink imprint in the future as I continue to learn how to produce, market, distribute. It's a complicated business. It's ever changing, you know. It's different every day. New sets of challenges and new ways to do things. And SPD, the demise of SPD is only sort of the tip of the iceberg, you know. It's big changes in the book world. Um, and
What are some other, because when you were talking about distribution, of course, I'm sure we're all thought about SBD, but what other changes have recently occurred or do you see coming up soon?
um, well, it's just a complicated landscape, you know. And I mean, for a while, I thought, well, ebooks are going to be a big thing. And so many of our titles are available in print and ebook. And I thought that would be a good, inexpensive option for students and just anybody. I myself read a lot on ebooks and on my tablet. But surprisingly, ebooks are not very popular at all. I'd sell hardly any. Um, so, I mean, even the novels and things like that. I mean, we don't publish only poetry. I mean, we have novels and nonfiction prose and all kinds of genres out there. And even those, the digital versions the sales are pretty much inconsequential. Um, so that's not the thing that everybody was terrified it would be, you know. But at the same time, print production is in such a state of flux right now. I mean, well, very few people can afford to print in the old way now, where you print like, you know, 3,000 copies of something and then you should have them shipped to a distributor and then you pay them to store them. Um, and that's just not the way it's working anymore. And like everybody's having to move to short run printing, if not simple print on demand. And but that world is kind of shaking up too, and all the smaller companies are attempting to compete with Amazon and having a very difficult time. I mean, even Ingram is having a hard time competing with Amazon. But I mean, Ingram is huge, but of course, Amazon is, you know, bigger than anything except Elon Musk, I guess. But so it's kind of technological, and then who knows the effect that AI is going to have. I mean, uh, y- you know, I remember way back, I mean, decades ago, there were a couple of scandals or basically scandals that where people trained computers to write poetry. Um, but that sort of thing is nothing compared to the capabilities now. And and I mean, in a way, it kind of seems to me to do that is antithetical to like, you know, to everything that poetry is. I mean, why would anyone want to do that? I guess is what I would ask. But it is going to change the publishing world, you know. I mean, when you go to a search engine now and you search for a poet, you know, you will get an AI summary of that poet's work and their sort of their alignment and their bio and you know, I mean, I don't know what it means, but I know it means it's going to be a different world, you know? Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. And just the fact that poetry depends upon the unprecedented, and AI is entirely dependent upon what already exists. And so they seem
Yeah.
to have
Hmm.
absolutely opposing relationships to language. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And could I, Cole, just for a second, also add the fact that AI is almost entirely trained on English,
Oh,
almost
I
entirely.
actually didn't know that. Hmm.
Yeah, that I've just been reading about that, and it means that other kinds of knowledges and languages are being squished away, which really adds to the importance of what you're doing with Diálogos, Bill. Really adds to it. And I did want to also just check in with you're doing international books. How is what's the impact of the tariffs, the international pressures? I know, for instance, Shayu was going to send me her book and said, I can't send you my book right now. It's too expensive.
Also,
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
um, in France, they're not shipping small packages to the United States, period,
Yeah,
because it's the pricing is so volatile that they just can't do it. You have to send it through DHL or another private shipping, which
yeah,
is going to impact, books flying around the world tremendously.
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
right. Shrinking the world.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the time. The hour itself is shrinking. Um, and we want to leave some time for people in the audience to ask questions, make comments. But before we do that, I just want to ask if there are any last thoughts, Courtney, Laura, Bill, any things that you have on the tip of your tongue that you want to contribute?
No, I feel like yeah, this has
Well,
been great. It's
thank you
great to hear about
very
both
much.
sides.
Well, a huge thank you. But yeah, I just want to say that the evidently the Choctaw name for New Orleans was Boban. But I'm probably going to make a mess of it. So excuse me, Bobancha, which is the place of many tongues. And I want to congratulate Bill and Megan and Sean and Courtney and everyone in that fantastic city for making that name true forever.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and many thanks to Cole for and Brooklyn Rail for setting this up, facilitating. Appreciate it.
Well, it was a great conversation. I think it just enriched everyone's day. And now I'll bet there's some comments. So maybe I'll turn it over to Magli, who can orchestrate the Q&A.
Yes, thank you all so much. That was such a wonderful conversation. And for people in the audience, if you have a question for our guests, there is a link in the chat where you can submit your questions. The first question is from Linda. Linda asks if Courtney can read the Dante reference again and says, "Thank you all. This is wonderfully rich."
Uh, uh, yeah, it's just this. It's the bright life is what Dante called life outside of the inferno, the life he left behind. I always think a movie is the bright light, and I always want to make another movie. I was just always struck by that like when Dante is in the Inferno, when he refers to like the world, he calls it the bright life, or at least in the translation that I have read, the Robert Pinsky translation that I really like. Um, and it reminds me when I think of the bright life, the feeling of like when you go to a movie theater and the screen lights up. And I feel like sometimes even just that moment, like I get emotional, like so yeah, that was that feeling.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you for that question, Linda. The next, it's not a question, it's but a comment from Kelly. Kelly says, "I just want to say thank you for organizing this. I learned so much and really enjoyed the discussion." And then the next question is from Ty. I'll give you a chance to unmute Ty.
Hi. This is a question for kind of everyone who's spoken today. Cole, you included, if you're down. Something that my friends and I think a lot about as like poets and workers and generally like artists and people who have to fund those art making practices. Like Bill, you mentioned doing carpentry work. Courtney, you mentioned the kid that you nanny for. And this is especially maybe relevant to just the phraseology of Courtney, your work, but this like balance between being the babysitter, i.e., like the worker, and then being the baby, i.e., like the artist who needs things and like wants to respond rawly to the world. And I think that in separate instances of life, you can get really caught up in being either only the babysitter or only the baby, and how you guys each approach finding a balance to those things.
Such a great question.
Well,
You want to start, Laura?
you just kind of do what you can, you know. I mean, there are times when I have to focus on making money, and then there are times when I'm out of work and I would actually like to focus on making money, but I actually have to focus on making books because I'm busy doing that. So you know, I'm kind of glad that my career has been as varied as it has. It's taught me a lot of things from a lot of different disciplines that have come in handy and been applicable in the oddest of ways. I mean, I don't mind the fact that you know, I never got a tenure track job or something like that that locked me into one particular academic enterprise. Not that I don't have respect for the academic enterprise, I do, you know, but the university fired me, and in the end, I was glad. Yeah. I don't know if that comes close to answering or what, but yeah.
Yeah.
Before I retired abruptly, abrupt retirement consequent to a pro-Palestinian post, I had tenure track, long, beautiful academic career. And the exchange of teaching poetry and writing poetry and thinking about poetry and talking about poetry was really productive. It worked out, even though academia itself got weirder and weirder as young people were under more and more duress and treated more and more like clients, instead of what they should be, which is, you know, when you're the teacher, they're the baby. So, you know, you take care of them. But I have dear friends who do other things, and it's quite clear to me that it's about what a colleague called hygiene. It's about making boundaries, making space to be the baby, and really honoring that space for what it's worth.
I think that I try I mean, I don't know if I have to really try too hard, but I actively don't believe in separating those two realms. And so I try, I think my work will only be stronger as an artist and well, I mean, I work in childcare, which is a very particular type of work, which is very like human and intimate kind of work. So like, I think my work in both areas is only stronger when I'm an artist while I'm at work, and also when I'm at work, I'm an artist. Like, and I see things with those eyes too, like while I'm working. I remember I'm like obsessed with Rilke, and I remember in one of the letters to a young poet, he's talking about how actually like he's like telling the young poet Franz Capus, like, you should actually, it's good that you have like a regular job. He's like, you should be working in like reality, and your work as a poet, which is about seeing and saying, will only benefit from that. And it won't benefit from being like sort of cloistered in a world that is like adjacent to poetry, that is adjacent to art, which is like a lot of us, I mean, I just think about that a lot. Like being in reality and like taking care of kids and changing diapers is definitely like reality. And but I think it's like what I make art from and what I observe and think about, you know.
Changing diapers does always feel like you're in the realm of the real. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very real moment.
Thank you for that question, Ty, and for those answers, everyone. The next question is from Nicholas Lavender, and Nicholas asks, what sustains the poetry festival and the NOLA poetry scene in general, in y'all's opinion, and what aspects of New Orleans culture lends itself to the scene?
That's my grandson being an imp there, trying to study on a question. What was it again? The can you reread the question? I'm sorry. What sustains it?
Yeah, so what sustains the
Okay.
poetry festival and the NOLA poetry scene in general, and what aspects of New Orleans culture lends itself to the scene?
Well, people like to come to New Orleans. Like I'll give you one example. We have the festival in April, which is festival month. And so we're always looking at the particular weekend that we're going to do it and making sure it doesn't conflict with anything else. But we finally decided that we would not worry about conflicting with the French Quarter Festival, which is a big, mostly music-oriented festival that happens. And in April. And so now we actually try to have it on the same weekend so that poets who come to town for the festival can go to that and hear some music too. Um, so I think it's sort of every aspect of New Orleans that sustains the festival. I mean, you saw the honor we got from the mayor. So apparently, even politicians look with favor on it, and I guess maybe we're just lucky we live in a city where they can look with favor on an organization that will have a pro-Palestinian demonstration as part of its second line, you know? So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a city that has made a huge investment in culture. It knows that culture is crucial and it supports
Oh,
it. And that is part of what sustains the scene. But I also want to mention, because I had a nice chat with Rodrigo Toscano, who hosts the pool party at the end, about New Orleans when he first got there. And he was coming there from, I forget whether at that point he was coming from which other American big city, but he just said, wow, this is so not competitive. This is so communal. This is so much about people wanting other people to succeed. And that's a major part of what sustains the scene, I say.
hmm
Poets in New Orleans definitely show up to readings, which certainly helps. Like the reading last night, there were 35, 40 poets there. When Courtney read in New Orleans, when Laura read in New Orleans, there were, 50, 60 poets at a poetry reading on a Saturday night at 6 p.m. And it's just one of, 3 poetry events that are going to happen this week. So I think people are really kind of primed to show up and participate and kind of be a part of the scene and, be a part of the community.
Yeah.
Thank you all for those answers. The last question is from an anonymous audience member who is wondering, what advice would you give a young writer looking to start a poetry press?
Looking to start a press?
Megan, you've got to answer that too. Right?
Take
Bill,
a
what do
deep
you-
breath.
Well, yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
other money and other sources of income? Do you have, and do you want to make money? Because if you want to make money, this is not the place for you. But yeah, I think it's if you have a dedication to, I mean, I think it's probably easier now than when Bill, when you started and when I started to actually produce physical work as far as like the software and stuff.
Yeah, there is software is still there's still a learning curve there, but and it is. I mean, it's easier to put something out there. Yeah.
I think you
But
should
I would
start the way most of us start is like first, just like photocopy you and your friends' poems and like staple it together and pass it out. That's like how all poetry starts to be distributed, right? Like we make, I mean, Trembling Press started making broadsides back in like 1999, 2000. That's all we did was we made broadsides. We didn't make chapbooks, we didn't make anything. And then we made chapbooks and they were hand bound, stapled until Bill was like, do you want me to teach you how to make a real book? And I was like, in 2006, I was like, I think Bernadette Mayer's book, Ethics of Sleep, was the first one that I did. But you had done a few more for Trim and Pella Press, kind of like walking us through how do
mhm.
you like do the layout and like do at the time small press distribution was great because it really helped with distribution. Um, that I think would be the biggest trick now is like without small press distribution, like who stepped in and like took over that? I don't know. I retired my press, so I'm not actively a press person anymore after 25 years or so. But
Yeah.
Also,
There's I'm using asterism now. I kind of like them. It's a different model and it's non-exclusive. So you aren't committed to use them only. Um, but I think they're the distributor I know of that is at least attempting to deal with the contemporary landscape and the kind of different world that it is out there, it's just
What
different.
is their model? Could you describe that a little bit and how it differs from, say, what SPD did? Or
Well, with SPD worked on a model that was very traditional, and really it was the same model that NBN, National Book Network, and Ingram, and um, all of the old distributors used, which was you print a batch of books, you send them to the distributor, they haul them and sell them to wholesale them to bookstores for you. And the sales to bookstores were always returnable. So they were very uh, iffy. Like you could think you had sold 100 books one month, and then the next 2 months later they get returned, and they disappear. And basically, the distributor charges you for every transaction along the way, including storage. And you sign a contract with the distributor saying that you're only going to sell your books through them. Not everybody, you know, upholds those contracts, but at least in theory, that was what you're supposed to do. Asterism is a completely different model. They're not um, exclusive. You don't sign any sort of exclusivity agreement with them. You can distribute via other means and use them also. They're just a convenient clearinghouse for bookstores. Their sales are non-returnable. So, which turns off a lot of bookstores, but it also makes the business much more predictable. And I think, it got to a point where bookstores would order 20 books just basically on a whim, thinking, we might sell these, and if we don't, we'll just send them back. And I think that now bookstores pretty much have to be selective about their inventory. They have to, they have to be careful about it because they're not going to. The returnability is one aspect of the past that is pretty much going to go away, I would predict. And it kind of has gone away in the poetry world. Yeah. Asterism also does one very publisher-friendly thing, which is their accounting is instant. It's all electronic, and you get a note every time a book sells. You get a notice immediately that day, and you're paid for it within a matter of days, couple of days. So, I know that they're struggling. They're not getting rich doing this, but they are surviving and hanging in there. And so I'm wishing them luck. And you know, I feel good about giving a little pitch to promote them. And you can. They also, I mean, they have a public-facing website. They're not wholesale only. You can go on there and buy books retail, and anybody can. Yeah,
Could I jump in for a second and
sure.
and just say, this is such a great question, and I want to say bravo to whoever, bravo or brava, to whoever is asking it. But I also then could Cole, you had a press. Charles Alexander is on this. Charles has a press. Susan Schultz is on this, I think still. She has a press. Could you just like maybe all three unmute and say like just what you'd say to that young person or person young in the world of publishing, thinking of starting a press? What would you say?
Charles, take it away.
Ask everybody who has a press that you know, because we're all different. We're all different. And so there is no model for doing this, and there's no model for doing it well. It certainly is possible. You can do it. It will form a community around it if you can keep it going. But as has already been said, income helps. Income helps in various ways. There are various means of distribution. You know, asterism's been talked about, but there are many more. Probably that shouldn't be your first worry as you're starting out. Your first worry should be, what do you want to publish, and who are you going to send these books to, and how are you going to build something? You know, I started in a very odd way in that I began making handmade books, and so there were only 100 copies of things, and they went to what they were doing, and it was only after a few years that I started making publishing trade books, and so I had a kind of a step ladder up. And I'll stop now because there's other people who should talk to this too.
Susan, are you still on the call? Well, briefly, I'll just say, just do it because however, you'll find a way to do it. And it doesn't matter if it lasts a long time or not. And it's interesting to see different presses arise and then, you know, have to go away, but another press will come up. And as long as people are continuing to start small presses, then there's always avenues for people to publish with. And it's, you know, obviously a labor of love, and it's a lot of labor, but I think it's, yeah, the important thing is just that people keep doing it. Are there other questions, Magley, or should we segue to Bill's closing reading?
Yes, that was the last question. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question and answered any question. And the floor is yours, Bill, to close us out with your reading.
Okay. Um, so I have a new book that I recently finished. It should be released by MadHat in January. Um, and it's kind of a tome. It's about 350 pages of poems responding to St. Augustine's City of God. And it's just called City of God. Um, and I went through the 1,000-page book and sort of I wrote a poem, not exactly in response to each chapter, but kind of in tangent to each chapter. And I'm gonna read three near the end. The book came about because on the day that I started reading the Augustine, it just happened to be January 6th, 2021, the day of the Trump insurrection. And the two things sort of went together in my mind, and they stayed together through the entire project. So I'm going to read three pieces from the near the end. Um, when I say it's a quote, that means it's a quote from the Augustine text, from the translated Augustine text. And we'll just see how this works. Quote, the law in his members warring against the law of his mind, end quote. Was it? Simple enough if you're ambivalent about going out tonight, more complicated if you're putting extinction of the species on the table. Biden thinking he's the only one who can stand up to Il Duce, for example. The slightest lapse of rhetoric and you want me to stand down? Never will I give up fighting for the divan on Air Force One. Meanwhile, Trump manages to get slightly martyred, then with stylishly bandaged ear prays at the podium for unity, at least among those who can afford porn stars, and Biden stumbles on with his lance high for about 5 minutes before passing the burden of proof to Kamala, causing everyone, quite despite ourselves, to feel a glimmer as we ourselves as we, quote, do our best to conjecture the great glory of that state, which we cannot worthily speak of because we have not yet experienced it, end quote. And who'll get the honor this time of sacking their own capital and blaming the other's God? That's, sorry, I just have to do this, but that's a reference to the sacking of Rome in 410, which is one of Augustine's main topics. And everybody was blaming, the pagans were blaming the Christian God for the sacking, and the Christians were blaming the pagan gods for it. And this next one speaks of the great lie. The great lie is a concept that threads all the way through the poem. Hitler's use of grosse Lüge in Mein Kampf, the grosse Lüge, the big lie, it was his well-formed and used political strategy of telling a lie that was so big that no one would believe that you weren't telling the truth, because it would just be so outrageous. Um, which of course is a primary Trumpian strategy. To believe the great lie is to be the true mystic, holy one who sees through reality to the real of pure desire. This life itself, if life it is to be called, Augustine says, attests to this eternal verity with its litany of temporal miseries. That is to say, the fall is in the naming, belief the shark fin of doubt. The more he believes, the less belief he owns, and the more the rhetoric glows. He orders the amanuensis to expand the catalog, strike the conjunctions, unfurl polysyndeton, pleonasm, conceits that wind like a dragonfly's path, metonymies to take the breath away, symbols that send a shiver up the spine, so we may know beyond a shadow. And then this one written on 5th of November, Election Day. We watched an episode of something we completely forgot and then turned off the TV. Quote, "They shall never lose their bodies even for the briefest moment, nor ever lay them down in death." End quote. Eros as the turning away sickened from Porphyry and Plato's forensic arguments. For democracy is kingdom of desire, pleasure and bondage, hideous orange face on the flag. Morning after at City Park and Canal, a guy slouches shirtless on a bench next to a heap of filthy bedding. Sister Natalie, the one-armed beggar, appears through a crack in the cemetery wall, lights a cigarette on a windless day. We're stunned but not truly surprised, having secretly felt its inevitability, and now relieved we no longer have to pretend. Don't leave love out of the equation, Mark told me, but this might be something I'm not equal to in this case. Augustine, too, speaks of love, of using love to drive vandals from the gate. Caritas, for example, of conservative causes, Bernie Marcus leaves his billions to. Charity of calling that woke crap what it is. And as Trump assembles his cabinet, who's rubbing their palms? Or does it really matter which fungible token sits at which Office Depot desk? Like those North Korean soldiers tanking into a Ukraine they've never heard of, drones on the front line, orders from the AI, and after the battle, those still living return to their benches. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. And as always, thanks to the Brooklyn Rail and thanks to Fong Bui. And thank you all, Laura, Courtney, and Bill for the conversation. And Magli, I know you're going to want to close us out with some words.
Thank
Yes.
you, Cole.
I want to second Cole's gratitude. Thank you, Bill, Courtney, Laura, and Cole. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Seeger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Eric Scheiner, Leora Shinori, and Eugenie Tsai on the story and work of Powerhouse Arts, a multi-purpose nonprofit art organization based in Gowanus. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Bill.
Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Bill.
much.
Thanks,
Love
Thanks,
you,
Laura. Thanks,
Laura.
I love you.
Good.
Thank you, Laura.
Great to see
Thank
you
you,
all.
Laura.
And
So
Nick,
fantastic.
Tamara,
Thank you.
Everybody,
and
take
me.
care.
Thank you,
Bye,
Laura.
Tom.
Thank you,
Bye,
Bill.
Charles. Bye.
Thank you, Cole. Keep up
Goodbye.
the good, everybody.
Thank you for doing all this.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Charles, for coming.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Skip. Bye-bye, Skip.
yes.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
work.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.